Good morning, everybody, and welcome to the third webinar of the Improve project. This morning, I'll be talking about our GIS participative tools that we developed for mapping the field names of County Donegal, projects that we undertook over the last 2 years in the county here. So just as a means of introduction, today I'll be leading out on the webinar. It's me, Dara McDonough. I'm an information systems project leader here in the County Council in Donegal with responsibility for GIS and networks. But we'll also be joined this morning by Dr. Joe Gallagher from Donegal County Council, who's the Heritage Officer, and Michael Meehan from Donegal County Council, who outside of his day job is a local historian with the local history group in Raemahi, who we collaborated with on this project. So that'll be the structure of the webinar this morning, as everybody else's is, I'm sure. And just a very brief overview of the county here, just to sort of set the scene. Donegal, it's the fourth largest county in Ireland, roughly 4,800 square kilometres, with a population of 161,000. Now you can see from the sort of breakdown of that population that it's quite a young county, and our older generation is a small portion of the county. That's quite important because that portion is getting smaller all the time, which has significance for this project. And again, the number of farmers, less number of farmers and people who work on farms is about 15,500. Again, very important for this project because these are the people who are out working in the fields and to know the landscape. So there's a considerable number of people out there with considerable amount of knowledge of the local landscape. And just from a GIS point of view, in the county there are roughly 260,000 fields of pasture land in the county, and about 27,000 rough pasture fields. So potentially there's a lot of field names out there. So I'm just going to hand over now to Dr. Joe Gallagher, who's just going to set the sort of heritage scene in the county over the next 5 minutes. So here's Joe.
Thank you, Dara. Yeah, I'd just like to take a few minutes just to talk about the heritage of place names. And as we know, toponymy is the study of place names. And of course, here in Donegal, we're very fortunate because we have a very rich heritage of place names in the county from a variety of traditions, be that in the Irish language, in the English language, or the Ulster Scots dialect. And these place names, they give meaning to our landscape and also the way in which we navigate through it. So things like, for example, natural features such as rivers and mountains were used as townland boundaries or as reference points in our landscape. The study of place names provides an opportunity for people to engage with their landscape and with their heritage, and I suppose it's from that point of view that I'm particularly interested in place names. Place names highlight the connections between people and place. I think people have an affinity with the places in which they live and in which they grew up. But the place names give an identity to our landscape as well. It's very important from that point of view. So the nomenclature, the naming of places or the naming of features in our landscape that we use provide insights into our attitudes, our values, our beliefs and aspirations as a society as well. Place names tell us about our landscape and also about our archaeology. We've given names to landscape features that provide us with reference points for our daily lives and also for local societies. Again, these can be field names, these can be the naming of local roads. Place names can allude to changes in society as well. Thinking, for example, in my own locality growing up, there was one of the local roads was called the Pole Road. And this was so called because it was the first road in our area that had electric poles erected when rural electrification was introduced in the mid-20th century. So again, indicating a very important change in society at that time. You'll also find as well that certain place names have common roots. Again, sometimes alluding to, for example, our archaeological heritage. A lot of our place names here in Donegal would have Doon as part of the name, DU for the N in the Irish language, suggesting the presence of a fort. Rath, R-A-T-H, would be another common root of a name in the county, and that would suggest the existence of a fortified enclosure. Again, these would be kind of archaeological monuments, and it gives us an opportunity then into the study of our archaeological heritage. But I suppose it's important to note that place names are an important but a disappearing part of our oral tradition here in Ireland as well. And of course, Ireland has a very rich oral tradition. In the past, information was passed on from one generation to the next through historical accounts, through stories, and through songs. But of course, that's changing, and that's no longer the case. And therefore, that makes the recording and the documenting of our place names all the more important. In some rural localities, every field had a name. As I said, it was a means of navigating through the rural landscape and also of communicating the rural landscape to others. As generations pass and as land ownership changes, place names, especially field names and the names of features in our landscape, they can be lost or replaced. So I suppose it's important for us to recognize as well that the study of place names is dynamic. It's not static, and sometimes we tend to think of it as static, but that's not the case. Place names change. Many people have different views on what the origins of place names are as a result of that, because these place names do change over time. And in Ireland here, we are very fortunate to have the place names branch of the Department of Arts, Heritage and the Gaeltacht, which is charged with identifying the official Irish place name for places in Ireland. And again, if you look at the website, www.loganyon.ie, Loganyon is the Irish for place name, you'll see the work that they've done in terms of verifying the Irish names of places in the country. For our part in Donegal County Council, one of the things that we did as part of our heritage plan was to undertake a pilot place names project a number of years ago. Our heritage plan is a 5-year strategic plan to conserve, manage, promote and enhance heritage in the county. And as part of that plan, we undertook a pilot project to collect and map local place names, field names and townlands. And there's a lot of interest among local groups in gathering place names and discussing and even arguing over the meanings of place names. And we worked with about 10 of these local groups and with the Department of Geography at the National University of Ireland in Maynooth in County Kildare in mapping those place names. Because I think one of the challenges for us as a society is to gather and map the location of place names. Many local groups recognize the need to gather place names and gather their meanings, but fewer groups understand the importance of recording the location of those place names. And I suppose as a geographer myself, that's I suppose one of my particular concerns, is that if we don't capture that information now, as generations pass, that information will be lost. So the integrity of the location of place names is very important, in my opinion, to a full understanding and a full appreciation of our landscape and our heritage. Thank you.
Thanks for that, Joe. I'll now hand over to Michael, who was our contact with one of the local history groups here when we started to roll out or design and roll out this project. So here's Michael now.
I suppose really for us in the Ramohi Historical Society, how this came about was we recognised ourselves within our own history group that it was necessary to record the local place names, such as the road names, the field names, etc. Because we recognised that even after my own generation, which I'm around 40 years of age now, that the younger generation don't recognise the ordinary place names that were used orally by people in the past, and that was going to die out. A number of the members of the group are in their late 70s and early 80s, and they would come from that generation that would have had that relationship with farming and the land, and therefore knew exactly the locations and the names that were used by people to identify those fields that they worked in. So what we had initially thought we would do, because of my working with Donegal County Council, that we would use that connection to try and obtain hard copy maps to plot the field names and place names on those maps. But we realised during our committee meetings that that was going to be a costly thing to do, you know, that we didn't have the means to actually purchase those maps from the OSI. So I approached Dara here in our GIS section and asked them if there was anything they could offer us to help, you know, with obtaining maps. So at that point, he highlighted that they were undertaking a pilot project for field names using the GIS mapping system. So we invited him to come down to Manor Cunningham to the local history group to an evening that we organised for the entire membership to be present and to participate in the delivery of a talk on how we would operate the system. So some of the older members were able to go and use their own computers, just sitting at night, go in and look at the maps, identify the fields, plot the name on the field, and as a result of that alone, there's been hundreds of field names obtained from some people that are in their late 70s and early 80s that they would otherwise have been lost, would have been gone. So it was a great opportunity for us to be able to use that to enhance our own local group as well. So there was a huge amount of information recorded locally. Even with myself, I would have remembered my grandmother using names for houses and roads, laneways, and that often reflected people that had lived there maybe 2 or 3 generations before, that their families no longer existed, the family names no longer existed. For instance, there was Shannon's Lane in Manor Cunningham. I've never known any Shannons or remember any Shannons even being talked about as such, but obviously there had to be Shannons living in the vicinity of Shannon's Lane at some point in history. I suppose the other thing was for the local farmers, using the field names was a way of them identifying where they would be during the working day. If they were going out to a particular field, for instance, there's one called the Duck's Nest. They would say, we'll be working in the Duck's Nest today, and people knew exactly where they were going to be. So it was like a system of postcodes, original postcodes, I suppose, in that sense. So then the other aspect for ourselves in East Donegal is we're a very unique area, very agricultural area, and it was heavily planted during the plantation of Ulster. There was some people remained of the indigenous Irish population to work as labourers. With that said, a lot of the names within the area had changed. Some of the Irish names were retained and can be reflected in the place names, but the area had changed. Some of the, for instance, the townland name for Drumahill would derive from Irish for the hill of the yew trees. Then other names such as Hunger's Mother obviously came in through the plantation where there was a heavy Scottish influence. Those names, for instance, the Kemey Hills, very obviously has a Scottish dialect attached to it. Even the meaning of those names can be a bit obscure now, but Kemey could have been a surname as in Kemey that came over from Scotland, or it could have referred to Kane the steps of a hill or whatever. It's hard to say at this point, but I suppose that gave opportunity for people to discuss the meanings of those names within our own group. I suppose the other thing that was apparent through looking at the plotting of the field names was the distinction between East Donegal that is heavily agricultural. There was a high density of names there, as opposed to some of the other areas within the west of Donegal, where the names were scarcer to some degree because of the poor quality of land, but then equally so, they would have had much more distinct names referring to, as Joe alluded to earlier, mountains or lakes or boundaries within the landscape.
Okay, thank you very much, Michael. I'm sorry we had a few sound problems there by the looks of the conversation and the texts there, but hopefully we're all back up and running. I think that was important just to sort of set the scene for the project. So we'll continue on now with the rest of the webinar here. Okay, so basically this is the application that we developed, and we might, after the end of this presentation, just pop out to the desktop and have a quick look at it interactively. But just as a very brief aside of sort of the importance of field names and how they are being recognized today, this is our local craft beer brewery in Rathmullen, which is sort of out the road a bit. I'd like to draw your attention to one of their products. Here it's called the Roddy Porter. And on that label, they have this bit of text. I'll just read it out in case you can't see it. In our little corner of Donegal, every field has its own name. The Long Tongue, Tolly, the Daisy Park. And behind each name lies a story that even many locals have long forgotten. A stone's throw from the brewery is a field with the intriguing name, Roddy. I think that label and that bottle of beer encapsulates this project in a way. They say every field has its own name. Behind that name, there is a story. Sometimes it's an easy story, complicated story, could be a long historical story. These names are sometimes long forgotten. We're losing the names. This is what we're trying to address with this project. And these names are very intriguing. As Joe alluded to earlier, there can be lots of debates about the origins of names and the meanings of names. I spent 30 minutes the other night with my mum on the phone trying to figure out what this Roddy could possibly mean. We came to the conclusion that it probably or possibly is the marsh with the red stained water as a translation. But anyway, that's just a brief aside there. So I'll just go in now to the rest of the structure of the webinar and start here with a high-level description. Basically, this system is an online GIS data capture application. We designed this to sort of replicate what people were doing with paper maps originally, basically putting a point on the map and attaching the name to it, recording the name. The good thing about the GIS system, though, is that name is recorded in a database. It's archived, it's captured, it won't be lost. Another issue, and Michael alluded to this, is the cost of paper maps from the Ordnance Survey. Well, this eliminates that cost for local groups by putting all the Ordnance Survey mapping onto the system. So now they can look at a 25-inch map, a 6-inch map, modern aerial photographs, or the modern vector maps. Whereas previously they might have just had to decide to buy one set of maps. And this system is a crowdsourcing tool. It's where we're trying to engage the public to capture the data. Not us, the council. We're just providing the tool, and it's the public, the local history groups, heritage groups. They are capturing their local data, and it's building up this collective of local contributions to capture a county-wide archive. So the objectives of the good practice were to create an application where local groups could access all this historical mapping and to create that database to record and preserve the local place names. Now, when somebody puts a point on a map and adds a name, writes a name on the map, that's all they're doing is writing the name. With the GIS, you can thematically capture that name. So it's a field name, or it's a road name, it's a coastal name, it's a river name. So you get more meaning attached to that local name. We can also add in descriptions or explanations for the names, or if they had a translation, names available in Irish and in English, we could capture all that. These are the sort of things that couldn't be captured on paper maps. So we're adding to this local history and heritage collective. The stakeholders in this practice, well, apart from ourselves in the County Council, the main stakeholders are the local history groups who came looking to the council to record these field names. Initially, they came looking for paper maps. Now they are stakeholders in this digital environment. And to a large degree, the public in general are main stakeholders because they will be the users of this information. And then the heritage of the county, as defined under the heritage plan, is another stakeholder. What are the distinguishing characteristics of this good practice? Well, it was our first crowdsourcing application. This is the first time that we've actually gone to the public and asked them to capture data on an online map in a GIS environment. So that was a big step for us. The main achievements out of the practice was that we had this vibrant online engagement with local communities. And as Michael alluded to as well, these local communities, they're aging communities. So it was fascinating to engage with 70-year-old, 80-year-old farmers in an online environment and guide them through the whole process. And these guys who are out in the field, they love maps, they understand maps, and seeing it in a digital environment, they're able to relate to it. Now they need hand-holding in terms of the technology and how to, but these guys are smart, they can learn very quickly and interact with the maps online extremely quickly. So we try to keep the application as simple as possible for this very reason, because we knew our target audience was going to be more of an aging community, the silver surfers, as they're known as. And we gave them a solution that works for them and us. So they get to capture their information. We get to archive it as part of our heritage plan. We can also, at a later stage, print out the map with all the place names that they've captured on those maps if they need them for local publications or presentations or the likes. How to successfully run a good practice. You have to have a champion. You have to have a local champion. I was lucky here. Michael was our local champion with our first group, the Ray Mahi Historical Society. And then we got other local champions in Mallinhead and Brocka. And these local digital champions were able to get the local groups together and arrange meetings and drive the implementation process. I have found in this particular project that my own personal interest in the topic definitely helped me to design and implement the project. And when you talk to these local groups, there is a vibrant very strong interest in capturing these details. And we also had to have the technology to actually deliver this solution. And we had at the time recently changed our WebGIS platform to an Esri platform, which enabled us to do this. So we were maximizing the potential of our investment internally in the council in WebGIS and maximizing the return for the public in delivering this good practice. So implementing the good practice, we had many meetings with Michael here locally to sort of define what is required. What do these local groups want to do? I had to sort of sell the concept to Michael that it wasn't just about capturing the name, but it was, what does that name relate to? Is it a field? Is it a road? Is it a river feature? Etc., etc. And that we could design a system that would help to very simply capture all this added information. And then we met with the local group to sell the concept. You know, would they be interested in doing it this way? And telling them all about, well, you'd be able to go from one map series to another map series and check it against the area photography. And it didn't take much to sell the concept. So in the development phase, we had to design a digital version of the traditional way of doing this sort of work. And that meant designing a GIS database, a SQL database to capture the information. And as this was all new territory for us internally, it took a few iterations of database design to get it right, which we got there. And then that all had to be put into the GIS application framework. That had to be designed and tailored to work with the urban survey mapping and various tools for looking through different layers. Say, example from the modern aerial photography into the old first edition 6-inch mapping. That development phase took about a month or two of work. And then we started to deploy, again, working with the local champion to interact with the community, ensure that the capacity building locally was there. This was done at the pace of the local community. We weren't driving this out. We chose dates that suited them, times that suited them, which generally were in the evening, etc., etc. So we weren't forcing anything out. We were very much a collaborative deployment. And again, at the acceptance, these local meetings were held at appropriate times for the local group. generally in the evening, when they meet normally in local community halls. The only stipulation we had was that they had a broadband connection so that we could actually present the system to them live and actually work on it live with them at the meeting. And generally word of mouth got out. This system was up and running. And we initially started with the Raymahi group, and then it rolled out. Malin Head got word of it. They contacted me, and we went out to them. The Braca group in the centre of the county got word of it, and we went out and met them, again, at their convenience. So in terms of evaluation, there's no real formal evaluation of the project. It's a sort of ongoing. The only way we can evaluate it is that if the numbers of points recorded is increasing, but I'm not too sure if there's an end to this project, considering the amount of fields that are out there and the knowledge. So we'll just keep pushing on with implementing and rolling out in different areas. The recognition of the project is that there's more and more local interests, getting more contacts from local groups about the system. The local media have picked up on the application and run stories in the local press at various times about it, which helps to make it more, heighten awareness of the practice. It is now a feature of the National Heritage Week, where we run a drop-in clinic in the County Museum for the week, where we set up a number of PCs and just invite people to come in, look at the system, interact with it, add data that they know locally into it. And so we were asked to attend the Heritage Week again this year. So I think we're now sort of a part of that Heritage Week. And I've also presented this system nationally at the GIS sort of conference. What are the improvements to the project? Well, I'll always say there's always improvements to be made. We can either add in different types of data that have been captured locally, or different ways of doing this. And one of our ideas is that we add in an audio field to capture that oral history that Joe was talking about. So we have to look at continuous development of the system to further the deployment into other areas of the county and to try and increase more and more acceptance of the application of that practice. The sustainability of the project, well, it's on our existing GIS infrastructure internally, so it's here to stay with the County Council. Initially, it was developed in an Adobe Flex environment, which we now have to change to a Java environment just because of the rollout of tablets and how Adobe products don't work on iPads and Android tablets too well. So we want to maximize that target audience. So that involves a change of software, but that's all within the existing GIS infrastructure. There is a moderating role to play in the background where the data that is captured has to be checked to make sure that it's, I won't say correct, but that it's not abused in any way. So if there is any abuse of the system, those are moderated and edited out. Also, we are in the process of putting in an automatic editorial functionality. So somebody might put in a point, it's a mistake, and leave it blank. We will delete those blanks out at a regular interval. But all that can be done automatically. The transferability, well, it's more transferability of the knowledge that we've gained over the engagement with the local community is of paramount importance for a project like this to work, since you're asking them to capture the data, engaging with them in a living lab type environment where it was constantly toing and froing between development and requirements, making sure that exists. Rolling out that knowledge that we have gained into other crowdsourcing applications. We are now looking at the sort of religious heritage information that's out there in the county. We've designed another crowdsourcing application to capture that. And again, that's a different target audience. There are operational costs and resources required to keep this system running, as I say, from editorial content to development, but they are. And it's very important that the public realize that they have a role to play in the data gathering. They can't wait for the county council to provide the information. In this instance, we're providing tools for them to capture the information. They know the local details. This is a way for them to capture that, their own local heritage. So that is the end of the webinar. For further information, this is the actual application here for the place names. This is the link to our map portal, donegal.maps.rgs.com, where we keep all our GIS information. You can follow us on Twitter at Donegal Maps. And this is the Donegal County Council website, donegalcoco.ie, where you'll find further information on the whole heritage plan, etc., and other services of the County Council. Again, this is my name and my email address if anyone wants to contact me on further information about the project. And again, just to remind us, this is what it's all about, capturing all those points on that hillside, all those fields that have names and tell a story. Guramagiv, Blair, and thank you very much for listening. How do you connect with the locals that have the knowledge? Well, initially, Magnus, it was about going out and meeting them in local community halls and talking to them and listening to them and presenting the application to them there and then, showing them how to use it, how to interact with it. And during those meetings, we would get them to add in points and take them through the whole process. So initially it was a physical sort of one-to-one meeting with locals. And then within those local areas, they had sort of local champions who would help them at later stages. So I hope that answers that question. I suppose one other thing just to add to the presentation is, because the way this is set up and that we are consuming a map service from the National Mapping Agency, this application could be rolled out nationally. It doesn't have to be a Donegal, not confined by the Donegal boundaries, because all the mapping for the whole country is there. So we have actually had a couple of people in Galway who have added in some field names down in Galway, which is very interesting. So there is potential there for this to be rolled out at a national level. I think I might have just answered that question. But we get our maps from the National Mapping Agency, and again, they are part of our GIS program here in the County Council anyway, so we have the maps anyway. This is just another way of using those maps. Yes, I think this is a good way of interacting with the elderly community out there, and it also has brought them together, and as Michael has said, sort of created debate and discussions locally, and stories, lots of stories. You go to these local meetings and these elder generation start talking. They can talk a lot. But the stories are fascinating, and it's great to record them. Could other countries use the same application? Yes, well, it's based on an Esri platform. So if there were Esri organizations, if they had an Esri GIS, yes, they could. You could share out the configuration files for it. You would only have to change your national mapping from ours to yours and set up a local database. This could also be shared out using, say, the likes of Bing Maps. So then it would become an international application and could be applied using, say, the Bing aerial photography in Sweden or Finland, Iceland, Ireland, and Derry, etc. Thank you very much. And again, just thanks to Joe and Michael for joining us this morning.